Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Going Disparate podcast with me, your host, Pam Rogers.
Pam, of course, is the staunch Republican. I am the other host. I'm a lifelong Democrat. My name is Mara Dolan, and we are delighted to have you with us today.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I missed last week and I apologize, but I'm back in action, and we have a great guest coming on today. It's Simon Rosenberg, and you can kind of probably tell the guests a little bit more about him.
Well, Simon Rosenberg was for years sort of very well known in insider Democrats, but he did something quite remarkable last year. He was the one Democrat who said there would be no red wave. And of course, there was no red wave. And he had good reasons for saying that. So we're going to ask him about that. Ask him if he sees any future similarities where another red wave is predicted that doesn't come. We'll be talking about Joe Biden's economic record and the presidency and why Simon Rosenberg says Americans are having a very good summer.
Great. Yeah, I definitely want to talk to him about the red wave issue. It's really interesting. So I want to hear his insights as to why he did that. And I checked out his business, or I don't know what you call it.
His Substack.
His Substack, Hopium Chronicles. And I was reading a little bit about his thoughts on RFK Jr. I'd like to just kind of chat with him about that too. So he sounds like a really interesting guy.
I don't want to talk about RFK Jr. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to stop you from answering the question. I'm just telling you now. I think that whole campaign is shameful and a waste of resources and yeah. But at any rate, since you all are here, we know that you were able to find us, and we want to make sure that other people can find us. So please go to whatever your podcast platform is. We're on all of them. We're on Spotify, we're on iHeart, we're on iTunes, wherever there are podcasts, that's where you'll find Going Disparate. Subscribe and give us a 5-star review. And please follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Insta, at Going Disparate. You can find us on YouTube, and please drop us an email so we know what you think to pamandmara@gmail.com.
Yeah, definitely check out our YouTube. We have all our videos posted up there, and you can see all of the crazy faces that I make.
Because sometimes I'll say, oh, if you could see Pam's face, but no, it's good to actually see Pam's face. And now, Pam, I think it's time to start talking about crime. There's a really interesting case you're going to brief us on.
Oh my gosh, it's so interesting. It has been all over the news, but there was an arrest made a few days ago in the Gilgo Beach murders.
Yeah.
And that is a beach that is in Long Island, New York. And I think over the past, say, 10, 12, 13 years, there are about 12 or 13 bodies that they have found there. And they just arrested a 59-year-old man named Rex Howerman, who is an architect in New York City, lives in Long Island, lives like a quarter mile from that beach. They keep mentioning how he is this hulking figure. He is 6'6" and 275 pounds. So that's like literally, that's like a linebacker. Yeah, it's a big dude. So yeah, they have charged him with three murders of women who were found dead in 2010. They are looking into him being involved in a fourth murder. They just haven't charged him with it yet. And the really interesting thing is that the Suffolk County Sheriff, Rodney Harrison, reopened these Gilgo Beach murders. They were all cold cases. He went in, he reopened the cases, and he started a dedicated task force of officers that were working only on this case, or these cases, so to speak, nothing else. They weren't catching any new cases. That was just this. And based on all of their work, which included DNA evidence, cell phone triangulation evidence, which is really interesting.
Whoa.
Did I say DNA? DNA.
Good. Yeah.
DNA was found on one body. There was a male hair found on one body. And then there was DNA of a female found on 2 other bodies. And the really interesting thing about that is they allege that the hair that was found on the one murder victim belongs to Rex Howerman, and the female DNA that they found on the other body, or they were wrapped in burlap, so it may have been somewhere on the burlap, belonged to Rex Howerman's wife. Right. So I'm not saying that like, oh, she's involved. I don't mean that. It's a it would say transfer DNA type case, because you could touch any surface, pick up the DNA of whoever else was just touching that surface. And then you can go home and touch your steering wheel or your car, and that DNA gets on there. So transfer DNA is, as a defense attorney, it's a great way for us to attack evidence. But in this particular case, it's going to be a little tough for him.
Well, and of course, in terms of defending this, it's much harder to say that someone's wife's DNA was there by complete and total coincidence.
Right. Yeah. And that, I mean, my thought is that at a trial, if they were to have a trial, right, the defense is going to bring in a DNA expert that's going to talk about transfer DNA. Sometimes people refer to it as touch DNA, but really scientifically in the criminal world, it should be called transfer DNA. And they'll bring someone in to testify about how unreliable that is and how DNA can be passed along and along and along and along in a lot of different ways and kind of debunk transfer DNA. But the male hair on the other body might be a little more difficult to explain.
Oh my goodness. Now, Pam, you've talked about forensic genealogy before. Yeah. You're studying it, and I was actually able to speak much more knowledgeably than I would have in a private conversation because you educated me. So thank you very much. But was that involved in this case as well?
No, it doesn't. It does not believe so. It looks like when they reopened it, what they initially did was they looked at cell phone triangulation.
What is that?
Okay. So what it is, there are cell sites,
right.
So CSLI, cell site locators. So at the time of the murders, they were able to kind of go back and see whose cell phones were pinging off of what tower in the region of the dead bodies and when they were dumped. So they actually came up with a list of cell phone numbers that were located in the area at the time the murders occurred when they found the bodies. So they had actually a list of suspects at that point in time. And they started to kind of run things down from there and look into each and every person using DNA.
So they were ruling people out.
And they finally came to this guy, and the DNA evidence sealed it for them. But it's the cell phone triangulation, which is really, really interesting. You can tell where someone is at any given time, and you don't realize it because it's bouncing off. So this guy was buying burner phones. They had the credit card receipts that he was buying burner phones.
Wow. So he was trying to evade being caught by cell phone triangulation.
Right. Yeah.
But it didn't work.
Interesting enough, it totally did not work. And then when they've executed search warrants, and today they're still executing search warrants on his home, but on his computers, there are apparently hundreds of searches that deal with why hasn't the Gilgo Beach murderer been caught yet? And what's new in the Gilgo Beach murder investigation, and what is cell site locator information? And so he was kind of obsessed with it. And he was also going back and looking at the photos of the victims that were online, looking at social media of the victims' family members. So this is an interesting one.
Wow. Are there commonalities among the victims?
3 of them, they believe, were alleged sex workers. So they're thinking that is how he came in contact with them. I think maybe the 4th one as well. I don't want to comment on the other people that were found. I'm just not sure. He hasn't been charged with them.
Right.
But yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. And he is, of course, innocent, just as everyone is, innocent until proven guilty. But
absolutely,
as I've said before, when we've talked about similar cold cases that are suddenly no longer cold, you can't be thinking about what this must mean to the victims' families and loved ones to finally have some answers about what happened.
Yeah, it must be incredible, because I would think that after a while you feel like, oh, this is never going to be solved. Right. And it probably keeps you up at night and causes you a tremendous amount of stress. And, they have mothers or fathers or loved ones or siblings or whoever. And it's a shame. The whole thing is a shame. It's a shame that these young women ended up in this position. It's terrible.
It's horrifying. And given the numbers of alleged victims at this point, you have to wonder how many others there might be, and whether these killings are things that a serial killer would have just continued to do. So these killings took place in 2010. It's 13 years later. Who knows what this guy, again, innocent until proven guilty, though, might be capable of doing in the future. So it is incredibly important to get that person off the streets.
Yeah. I don't know why the Suffolk County Sheriff said this, but he did say in one of his interviews that the reason why they picked him up the couple days ago, the reason why they arrested him and took him into custody was that they had reason to believe that he was possibly going to commit another murder. He did not expand on that. So
Okay.
didn't know like why there was no follow-up question to it. And we don't know. So it's interesting, right? I mean, it's just fascinating stuff. If you like crime, which you and I do,
which we do.
We love.
And now we are delighted to welcome Simon Rosenberg. He's just coming onto our Zoom right now. So just give us one little second. There he is.
I'm going to be right back. So I'm here.
I'll introduce you while you're gone.
Yeah, okay.
You know who you are.
I know. Can you just wait to give me? I just have to run to the restroom. And
I can just pause it. I'll just pause it right now. And now we are delighted to welcome Simon Rosenberg to the podcast today. Simon, you can find at Hopium Chronicles on Substack. He has been, I like to say, sort of well-known among sort of insider and smarter, well-informed Democrats. But as of last fall, he became sort of a national hero. He was the most optimistic Democrat in the country. He saved my mother a lot of anxiety. He was the one person who said that there would be no red wave. Now, before this happened, you could find him on MSNBC and the Washington Post, but now he's absolutely everywhere, and we are thrilled to have him on the broadcast or the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Simon Rosenberg.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. And it's the first time I've ever been called a national hero. I'll make sure my wife gets to hear this.
Well, like seriously, I had Democratic friends who were freaking out, and I told them what you were saying. So tell us how you knew. How did you know there wasn't going to be a red wave?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple in some ways, is that, the whole national media really got fixated on a very narrow set of data, which was national polling. And you were only looking at national polling, the election looked like it was going to be a good election for Republicans. But when you added all this other data to augment from the core polling data, the state-based polling data, the state-based polling data that was not flooded with Republican, bad Republican polls. If you looked at voter registration data, the performance we had in the House races, the Kansas special election outcome that took place, the early vote, which was very Democratic, all the money we raised, there were all these other measures of intensity that were pointing in our direction, showing that we were motivated and excited, and they weren't. And so when you do data analysis and analytical analysis for elections, you can only make a conclusion that something's happening if all the data is pointing in the same direction. And all the data wasn't pointing in the same direction, it was pointing in different directions. And so what we kept saying is that we thought the election looked like a close competitive election, not a wave election. And we were right, thank God, that we were right about that. And what's been exciting for Democrats is that basic sense of us overperforming expectations and doing better than we thought has carried over to 2023, right? We won in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Colorado Springs, Colorado, 2 Republican cities that had been long dominated by Republicans. We just flipped those mayoralties in May. We obviously won in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court race where we got to 56%, amazing performance for the Democrats. And we won a really critical special election in Pennsylvania in the House. So that basic idea that we're overperforming expectations in the places where it really matters, they're underperforming, has carried on, at least so far, through 2023.
That's interesting. And Simon, thank you so much for being here. It's so great to have you here. First of all, I have to say, as a Republican, that I was so excited because of this red wave. And I was like, my friends were talking about it and everyone's texting and emailing and everyone's like, this is so great. This is going to be amazing. Right. And then the next day we were all like, what the hell happened? Right. Like, okay, nobody let us in on this fact that, there was not going to be a red wave, but we were totally counting on it because the press and the media had just like built it up to be something so huge.
Well, can I just say that it's really interesting. If you go back and look at the New York Times did a whole big piece on this in the end of December, a front page story where Mitch McConnell's top political guy is in the story. I'm in the story, and where McConnell's guy says this was never going to be a wave election. We never believed it was a wave election. And part of the reason it became a wave, right? Everyone thought it was going to be a wave in the spring. And then by the end of the summer, most of the commentators moved back to close competitive election because that's what the data showed. But then what happened is that there's some group of Republicans produced dozens and dozens of polls in the battleground Senate races that were false and wrong, and pushed the polling averages down against the Democrats in those races, creating an impression that there was a wave, that the election was changing at the end. And so part of the reason the Republicans were bamboozled and you were disappointed is your own side created a false impression, which Mitch McConnell's team believes that impression of the red wave, that false impression, may have cost them the Senate. And so we know that it cost us the House. I mean, I believe it cost us the House, but part of the reason that the media, right, to your point, settled on this was there was manipulation by Republican groups to create a false impression about the election. We've never really been able to figure out who did it, why, what their motivation was. I have my theory, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that, Republicans, as we head into 2024, for those of you who hope to win and have a good election, the battleground now, we've had 3 consecutive elections in the battleground parts of the country where Democrats have done very well, where Republicans have not. We've litigated MAGA now in 3 consecutive elections, and we've done very well. And I think it means that if your candidate feels like MAGA, right? They know what MAGA is there. They voted against MAGA 3 times. And I think the strong performance we had in the battlegrounds, where we got to 59 in Colorado, 57 in Pennsylvania, 55 in Michigan, 54 in New Hampshire. We just got to 56 in Wisconsin. I think the battleground has moved a little bit further away from Republicans after this last election, where once again, what was being presented to these voters was sort of a party that felt like they'd gone too far. And so I think that the hill to climb for whoever the Republican nominee is in the battleground states that will determine the presidency, I think, is a little higher than it was even in 2020.
Now, Simon, I know you're saying that America is having a very good summer, and there are a lot of reasons for that, but I want to start you off with a quote from Margaret Sullivan's most recent blog. I'm a huge fan of Margaret Sullivan.
Yeah, she's great.
She's great. She quotes Richard Toffel, who's the president of ProPublica, who said, historically, a president running for re-election with 3% inflation rate and a 3.6 unemployment rate would be pretty much a shoo-in. Now, I think people just consistently underestimate Joe Biden, and I think they're just going to keep doing that. But he's got a point, doesn't he?
Yeah, look, I think we have to recognize there's one other piece of the conversation about 2022 is that, we're still sort of on the edges of COVID, right? I mean, we just went through a national trauma. I mean, this was something that affected all of our lives in a very dramatic way. And I think people, like the Great Depression, it may be that people don't feel good again for a long time, or that it's going to take something extraordinary to make them feel settled and that we're really on the other side, and that this recent trauma of COVID is really, really behind us. Even though we don't talk about it, and it's not something we spend our time discussing, it doesn't mean it's not in the back of our mind, right? And so I do think that part of what's happening right now with Biden's approval rating is a little bit of a COVID hangover, in a sense that, we can't really trust that things are better. We don't really know, right? We just went through this collective trauma. I think the other thing that's going to happen is that, there were reasons that, remember, in 2022, we did really well with Biden's approval rating being low, about where it is now, and with the economy actually not being as good as it is now. And so I do think that right now, look, if there's a perception that our engagement in Ukraine was successful and the economy feels like it was pretty good, he should get reelected. I mean, I think there really are going to be 2 fundamental sort of touchstones for his brand in 2024, because every incumbent is running on, did I do a good job? Are things better in the country? I think he can make the case that things are better, but I think the 2 things that are going to really drive that are going to be Ukraine, and whether there's a perception that he's been successful there, we've been successful, and whether the economy feels to people like things are better. If we're successful in Ukraine and people feel like the economy's better, he's going to get I think he's much more likely to get reelected than not. And I think those are the things to stay focused on. I mean, there's lots of other issues that are going to matter. And if Trump's the nominee, his age issue is going to be, it's going to be harder for Republicans to use because Trump is only a few years younger than Biden, and Biden, and so I think there's a lot of belief that Republicans are going to be able to use his age issue and kind of being a little bit out of it as a gateway to unseat him. I think his counter to that is, hey, I've done a pretty good job. The country's better. We've revitalized the West. And so all of his success is a way of minimizing the attacks on him for his age and being, so-called a little bit out of it, which is sort of how they, how the Republicans go after him on that stuff. I think it's a manageable problem as long as the country's doing well. If the country's not doing well, his age will become a bigger liability for him.
Can I ask, that's really interesting, Simon.
Yeah.
Can I ask you more about Ukraine? Because when you
Yeah.
were saying there was two things, I was not expecting you to say Ukraine. So why do you think Ukraine is a bigger issue? Because to me, it's not. I mean, I
Yeah.
support what we're doing, but I thought maybe you would have said crime or the Supreme Court or something else.
So I think all those things, I think that war and peace, what usually drives elections, right, are peace and prosperity. It's like, are we feeling secure, and are we doing better economically? I think if the war isn't going well, and if there's a perception that, Putin has sort of rebounded, it will be deeply troubling for Biden's reelection. I mean, and I just think it will be we've spent so much money. The Republican argument, right, is that not everybody, but some are spending too much money there. We should be spending here at home, blah, blah, blah. I think if there's a perception that his big foreign policy initiative didn't succeed, it will hurt him. And I think if it appears to be successful, I think it's going to be an enormous it'll be a positive on his balance sheet, because he's going to be able to use it as a gateway into a bigger conversation around freedom, democracy, preserving our rights, preventing our rights from being taken away. It's a much bigger set of issues around traditional role of the United States, more like a Reagan Republican, right? I mean, it feels more Reagan-esque, right? And the contrast between Trump, if he's the nominee, being pro-Putin, being squishy on America's role in the world, and Biden, feeling a lot more like a traditional American president. That contrast, I think, will be very consequential to people, in my view, right? But we'll see. I mean, I just think the downside, as we saw with Afghanistan, when Afghanistan didn't go well, his approval rating took an enormous hit. So I think it will matter. I think the issues around crime and that I think Republicans have been counting on, wasn't strong enough for them in 2022, because in part, the truth about crime, there's just some basic facts about crime in America. First of all, it's a fraction of what it was 30 years ago. I mean, crime is way down all across the country by huge amounts. And in Washington, D.C., we have 100 murders a year now. It used to be 800 murders a year in Washington, right? New York City has its lowest crime rates that it's had in the modern era. The second thing is that murder rates are much higher in Republican states than Democratic states. Mm-hmm. And the idea that somehow Democratic areas are more full of crime is just not database. It's not based on data, right? And then the third thing is the murder rate, we know from this year, has come way down across the country. And I think what happened was that during COVID, we should have expected the crime rate to go up. People were so unsettled, right? People's lives were so altered. We had this national trauma. And of course, the crime rates were going to go up. They went up a little bit. They didn't go up that much. And now they're coming back down. And I think this issue, I think a lot of the issues that animated DeSantis and the Republicans during 2021 and 2022, the schools issue in Virginia, which to me was more about COVID than about woke, about the urban unrest that we saw, the crime rates, those issues I think will be very much, they could very much be in the rearview mirror by 2024. And so when I look ahead as a strategist, I can see our argument, right? Our argument is we've done a good job, right? The country's better off, blah, 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 blah. What's the Republican argument? Biden's too old. It's not going to be sufficient, because a lot of I joke that America's having a good summer. What's not having a good summer are Republican talking points against Biden, all of which have been basically evaporated. Even just take the border. I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post, not the New York Times, the Washington Post had a story over the weekend about the border saying it's eerily quiet. I mean, Joe Biden's new efforts on the border has basically slowed the flow to the border in almost historic ways. And that's, so crime is down, the flow to the border is way down, the deficit's way down, inflation's now way down, the economy's booming. I mean, I don't know how you run against him. I don't know where the places you have to go. And I think what it means is that all these attacks on him as a leader, Hunter Biden, the corruption stuff the Republicans are trying to push, his age, those become more important for Republicans because the other attacks on him as president, I think, have become far less salient and will be far less successful next year than I think Republicans had hoped.
Just turning back a little bit to the economy, you've spoken a lot about the Biden economy, pointing out such numbers as Biden has created 7 times more jobs than the last 3 Republican presidents combined. And back to the ProPublica president, he also said, historically, the press wasn't afraid to say when the economy was strong, which is a really good point. But Margaret Sullivan herself said that journalists may not always have the economic knowledge or patience to delve into the policy details of Biden economics. And I wonder about this stuff because I don't think that's a complicated point. 7 times more jobs in the last 3 Republican presidents combined. So I'm not sure whether they don't have the knowledge or they're intimidated. They think it might be hard, but it's not, is it?
Listen, there's no factual case to make the case that the economy is not doing really well. I mean, we may be living in the best economy in the history of the country right now. It doesn't mean people don't feel it, right? I recognize there's a disconnect between the economic data we're looking at, right? Lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, the lowest uninsured, lowest poverty rates in American history, right? You know, you go down the list, I mean, the deficit is 1/3 of what it was when Biden took office by GDP. You know, inflation is now down to the Fed targets. Our recovery, our economic recovery has been better than any other G7 country. Inflation here is half of what it is in Europe right now.
Right.
You know, even one of the big arguments, and you guys know this, the Republicans make is that Biden somehow waged a war on energy and that it's why gas prices went up. Well, gas prices are way down and we're going to produce more oil in America this year than any year in American history. So if he was waging a war on energy, he's doing a pretty bad job on it. And so all these measures, things are better. And I think the question becomes is how do we, if we can't convince people that, and by the way, another stat is that there's the conference board tracks people's happiness at work. And people are happier at work today, more people are happy at work today than they've ever been in recorded history in polling. Right.
What?
And so, it's in my stuff. I'll send it to you. The White House is now actually using this as well. Worker contentedness. Some of that had to do,
Simon,
by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think it's because people, after being at home for COVID for so long, are actually just happy to get back into the workplace and socialize in a sense?
It's interesting. It's a great question. And what's interesting about the data, and you should look at it and talk about it on your show and see what people say, is that it's part of what's driving it is that people love working from home, actually, right? Because for people with families, they're spending more time with their kids and they're catching more little league games. And, you know, all those things are not commuting. All of us who've ever had to commute long distances know what a nightmare it is. The flexibility that people have, the increased flexibility is a driver, but they test 20 different measures. And by virtually every measure, it's up substantially, right, from where it was a year or 2 years ago. And this gets to my premise that I talked about earlier, is that I think talking about American politics without talking about the trauma of COVID leaves you in a place that is disconnected from people's life experience over the last few years. I think, to your point, I think people are so content, in part because they are making more money. I mean, wages are way up in the United States. And, you know, for the bottom 25, 50%, we've seen a huge gains in income and wages, far more so than people at the top, right? That people feel, I think there's a lot of data showing that people actually feel better about the country, their own life circumstances, than they feel about the country. I think there's a sense that the Fed has data showing that people are like 75%, I'm doing okay, but the country's at like 35% economically. And so there's this big difference. And you can imagine saying, I'm doing well, but if you're a Democrat, you look at the Republicans and say, I don't know, they're kind of crazy. And Republicans look at Democrats and say, I don't know, they're kind of crazy. And so these measures of whether the country's healthy, I think, are maybe not prescriptive to actually how people feel about what's happening in their own lives. And we're all going to be, the good news is we're having a big conversation about this. I mean, the article you cite is raising questions about, why is it that, listen, who just did major takes on this? The Economist, not a left-leaning publication, just did an entire cover story about how the American economic track record over the last 30 years has been the best in the modern world. Why don't Americans feel it? And then Fareed Zakaria did this amazing 6-minute video showing how America is now stronger today economically than it's been in a long time. So we need to have this debate. I mean, the important thing is thank you for letting us air this out. And my point to the two of you is that I don't think it's healthy that people don't feel good about a country when it's doing well. You know, we need to take the wins when they come, you know, because things are not always good. They're really good now. Things are really good now. And we should give Americans permission to feel good about their country and feel good about this project called the United States and feel good about our democracy and our economy. And this is where my big beef with Republicans are right now, which is that I think they're trying to deny Americans the ability to feel good about America, our democracy, the American project, our economy, each other. And we as Democrats need to fight that impulse to talk down the country and to let Americans, you know, have the sort of the affirmation that they live in a good country and that things are good here and we can solve our problems. It's not all, you know, carnage as Trump discussed. And I think this is really in some ways the most important discussion in the country right now, which is, can we once again, I mean, I do a lot of talks about young people and youth voting. And I say, you know, one of the greatest gifts we could give to young people is to let them feel as, to let them love their country the way that we did when we were growing up, right? I mean, what an incredible gift we could give to young people who don't feel that way today, who don't have that sense of, I live in this historically remarkable country. We've lost a little bit of that. We need to get that back. And we're not going to get it back through Trump's plan, I believe. I think we're in the process of regaining our mojo as a country now, even today, right? There's data coming out today showing that China's had one of its worst economic quarters in modern history. Russia's stumbling, China's stumbling. America was, you know, leading the world in NATO last week. America's strong. Joe Biden's been a good president. I would love it. It would be great for the country to have that sense that, you know, they live in a good country with a good president. We're doing good things again. I hope we can get there in the next year and a half.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think it's like a really interesting message, Simon, for sure. And obviously from the Republican side, right, we see it like the opposite way. We're like, oh, we love our country too. And we love this, we love that. Do you ever think, or actually, no, I'm not.
Go ahead.
Strike that. If we were in court, I would say strike that.
Yeah.
What issues or what, because we do, I mean, we're doing this podcast because we want to embrace like non-adversarial conversations. And we want to like open up and just let anyone say what they want to say. But is there anything that you agree with Republicans on? Are there any specific issues where you're like, you know what, I agree with that?
I've worked with Republicans on many issues here in Washington over 30 years. I went on Fox News for thousands of appearances unpaid to show that Democrats and Republicans could have civil conversations together. I lived, you know, it was important to me to do that. I never took a paycheck for that and took lots of abuse for it many times. But I felt it was important for our democracy. I think my view about right now is that the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln and Reagan, has been overtaken by extremists and extremism. I don't think that's going to be the case forever, but I think it's today. And I think it's why my hope is in this election that we beat Donald Trump by 10 points and that we make this a blowout election, the clear repudiation, not of Republicans, but of MAGA and of the direction the Republican Party has taken, and that it helps, you know, more sensible Republicans reclaim their party back from the extremists and the grifters that have taken it over in recent years, so that we have something more like a center-right party again, a Charlie Baker Republican Party, not a Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis Republican Party. I would love that. I think that would be great for the country. I think it would be good for Republicans. I think it'd be great for the country, and because we don't always get things right, we need a check on us, and we need to be challenged. But MAGA is different, right? I mean, I think what's motivating people, and the reason Democrats are raising more money and have more volunteers than ever before, and we're performing at very high levels in these elections, is that people feel that if we stumble once, that our democracy could go away. And that's not something I want to get to a point that we're back to normal Democrat-Republican debates, right? Not if we stumble, our democracy goes away debates. And I think and the truth is the Republican Party has been unable to stop MAGA. And it's been the Democrats that have stopped MAGA. And we have to keep doing it. I mean, Joe Biden got in to the presidential race as you remember, because of Charlottesville. He said, this isn't the America that I know and love, and I'm going to fight to make sure we don't go in that direction. And I think we have at least for now, where we have enormous common cause is around making sure our democracy prevails. I think that's where there's enormous opportunity for collaboration. I do work with the Lincoln Project guys and Bill Kristol, and I admire Liz Cheney. I praise Liz Cheney so much for her courage and patriotism. And right now, I think many of us are on the same team. We won't be someday, right? But we're on the same team, which is America's team, and against the disillusion of our democracy. And I think that's where we have to find ways to work together. And I'll just say one last thing, which is it was amazing to me in 2022 how many in places like Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, you had big chunks of very prominent Republicans endorsing Democratic candidates in an unprecedented way. I mean, the day that Gretchen Whitmer announced for governor, she had 150 prominent Republicans standing by her side at her announcement, fighting against a MAGA candidate. And I think this kind of temporary pro-democracy alliance that has stuck together is one of the most important developments for our democracy. And I really want to say on air with you right now, and I've said it millions of times, I'm so admire the patriotism and courage of Liz Cheney and Bill Kristol, and my dog is barking, sorry about that, and all the other Republicans who stood up and said, no, this isn't the party of Lincoln and Reagan needs to go, and are willing to stand up. So I've brought Bill Kristol onto my show. I've made a lot of space for never Trump or never MAGA Republicans in my work. And I do everything I can to praise them, because I always say that I don't know that I can do what they do. I don't know that if my party lost its way, I don't know that I could do it. Stick with it. My son's taking care of my dog. I apologize.
No.
And so I think that's an area where, we see where we have common cause. And I'll say one other thing is that I think you've seen a lot of pushback among Republicans in Washington against the more pro-Putin, anti-Ukraine point of view, right? McConnell, and when DeSantis sort of took that position, he got heavily criticized by Republicans. That was really important. And I think we have a lot of common ground on Ukraine, as you said earlier, I think, Pam, right? Is that there is a lot of common ground there. And Simon, so I think there's a lot of places we could work together. Yeah.
Simon, I just want to ask you one more question, because we don't want to keep you. We just have a couple minutes left.
Yep.
The one thing that worries me, and I've said this on the show before, is a third party candidate. I've spoken on this show before about no labels. Joe Manchin is actually headed into New Hampshire to do a town hall sponsored by No Labels. You've said that they're full of deceits and lies. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's important to recognize that we have a whole series of candidates. It's not just one. I mean, we have Jill Stein is back, and the campaign manager for Cornell West in the Green Party, which we can't discount. It had an impact last time. Robert Kennedy Jr. is doing whatever the hell he's doing, and he's acting like a pro-Putin, pro-MAGA guy who, I think he's auditioning to be Trump's vice president so they can run as a bipartisan ticket. And I think we have to take that very seriously. I don't think anyone should discount what's happening with Robert Kennedy. And then the third one is No Labels. And there are two fundamental lies that No Labels is built on. One is that they actually have a chance of winning the election. That's not true. It's a joke. I mean, I think the absolute ceiling for No Labels is 8 to 10% of the electorate. I don't think it's any bigger than that. And particularly if it's Joe Manchin, by the way, I have a hard time seeing any disaffected Democrat voting for Joe Manchin. He has a profile that looks much more like a Republican than a Democrat. He actually may get a lot of Republican votes, right? Never Trump or never MAGA votes. We haven't really seen real polling data on this, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Manchin pulls more Republicans than Democrats in 2024. But the other lie is the foundational lie of No Labels, which is the very first paragraph of this document they're releasing today, which equates the Democrat and the Republican Party as being the same.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, how can you argue that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the same, and that the two parties represent the same values, and that they're equally extreme and equally dangerous? It is not something that a responsible moderate could say with a straight face. It's a Republican talking point. And because what that argument does, it obscures the problems of the Republican Party and obscures all the successes of the Democrats. There's no Democrat, there's no independent-minded person could look at American politics today and say Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the same. And so I think that No Labels is built upon two really foundational lies, and they're deceitful. And what people have to recognize, they're untrustworthy. It's very unclear, they're hiding their donors, right? If this was a reform movement to fix American politics, why are they hiding all their donors? It's extraordinary. They're all of their activity is hidden. It's very anti-democratic, right? At its core, it's very anti-reform. And even their agenda today, when you read their agenda, 85% of it lines up with Democrats. And so this idea that somehow they're presenting some kind of significant alternative to the Democratic Party is not true. And then finally, we know that most of the donors that we know about, the ones that have been public, are Republicans. And I think to me, what's happening here is the Republicans are leaving an option open of attacking Biden. They created Jill Stein in 2016. Jill Stein was a creation, right? So Biden was attacked from the left. Now he's going to be attacked by Democrats, right? Using a super PAC that can take unlimited money, run $500 million against Biden from a Democratic organization. Then he gets attacked by Trump and his super PAC, and then Russia and all the foreign governments that have been working so hard to keep Trump alive also come in, right? And what they know is that Donald Trump is not going to be able, it's much more likely in my mind that Donald Trump gets 45% of the vote than 49% of the vote. He can't get a majority of the vote in the United States, and so they need to win as they won in 2000 and in 2016. Which is having a third-party candidate whittle enough votes away from the Democrats that Republicans win without getting a majority, and that's how they've won the last two times, and so they're trying to do it again. And I worry. What I really worry about with No Labels, and I know a lot of the people involved in it, is that I think they're liars. I think they're they're lying fundamentally about who they are, what their project is, and it's deeply disappointing because there are some serious people who I respect involved in this project. And I think that, as I wrote over the weekend, does Joe Manchin really want to go down in history as Jill Stein? Is that after all this stuff? And that's because they can't get more than 8 or 9% of the vote. It's not possible. There isn't an available audience for them. And even though there was a poll showing that if you have you want to know how low their ceiling is, right? In a poll where the No Labels candidate was described as a moderate independent, right? Which I don't know that Joe Manchin will be seen as a moderate by many people. A moderate independent, they only got 20% of the vote. And so their ceiling, describing their opportunity in the most powerful way possible, is 20%. My view is that once you start putting Manchin's name in, or any of the other candidates, they're going to be at 5-6%. People are going to realize this is ridiculous, similar to Jill Stein and Robert Kennedy. It's not a serious thing. And I think their numbers will evaporate over time. But that's why their fundamental argument is that this is an attempt to win the election with this agenda. I think it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. And there isn't a third-party lane in America. Donald Trump's going to get 45% of the vote if he gets hit by a bus 2 days before the election. Joe Biden's going to get 45% of the vote, even if he gets sick. I mean, that vote is locked in. I mean, the actual independent vote in America is 8-9% of the electorate. It's not 20%. And so I think it's built upon deceit and lies. I'm deeply disappointed. And I think that my own view is that they're going to walk away from this. Once we start getting real polling,
Oh, yeah?
that the showing them at 5-6%, who's going to do that, right? I mean, who of these people, not Robert Kennedy, not Jill Stein, not Cornel West, but John Huntsman, and Joe Manchin and whoever could be the candidate. Once there's real polling, not this bullshit polling that's been being, pushed around, but real polling showing them at 5-6% with a ceiling of 8 or 9%, I don't think they're going to do it.
Because you think they won't be able to get a candidate? Because my view has always been they're going to do it. They have the money. They have so much money they don't care. They'll do it for the fun of it. So you think they won't be able to get a candidate?
I don't know, or the candidate drops out because they don't want to be embarrassed. I don't think Joe Manchin wants to be Jill Stein. I don't think that's what he wants his role. I think that he's playing, there's delusion inside. There's polling. Look, I could create polling for you showing you that there's a lane for Joe Manchin. That polling is not true. because what happens is that you have to do what's called an informed ballot. So if you ask the question of moderate independent, you can get it up to 15, 16, 18%. You ask Joe Manchin, who is pro oil and gas, has bucked the president on blah, 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 right? You inform the electorate about what he actually stands for. My prediction is he gets to 6, 7, 8% in a 3 ballot race. I don't think Trump's going to fall below much 45. I think he's going to hold his, and I don't know that we're going to fall below 49, to be honest. I don't know that there is, I think our floor is actually very high in this election, as it has been in the last 3 elections. And so remember, here's another data point for you, is that since 2008, there have been 4 from 1992. So since 1992, the Republicans had this incredible presidential run from 68 to 92, where they won 5 out of 6 elections. Some of them were blowout elections. We struggled, right? We only won in 76 by 50.1%. But then in 92, things changed, and we had a new Democratic Party, Bill Clinton. We've won more votes in 7 out of 8 elections. It's the best popular vote run in American history. No political party has ever done what we've done in the last, out of the last 8 elections. From 1992 to 2004, we averaged 47% of the vote. But since 2008 and Obama, we've averaged 51% in 4 elections. The last time we did that was in the 1930s and 1940s. So we're going through the best presidential run that we've had since FDR. And, we are the majority party. I mean, the last 4 elections, it's been 51-46. This notion this is a center-right country is completely ridiculous, and based on just data, right? And so we go into this election far more likely to hit 49, 50, 51, 52, even higher, right? But so I think, long story short, is that I think what we have to remember about all these third-party candidates, none of them have any chance of winning. They're all acting as spoilers. And it's not really clear we should be paying a lot of attention to them, because they're not really deeply relevant to the election. And I think, as a Democrat, for your Democratic listeners, spend your time not worrying about Joe Manchin and things you can't control. Spend your time building up Joe Biden. The stronger Joe Biden is, the less likely it is that they're going to be relevant in the election. And that's where we need to be spending our time in the next year and a half.
Simon, is Joe Manchin's Senate seat up in 2024?
Yeah, and he's got a serious candidate running against him, and is the current governor of West Virginia. And so Manchin may have been looking for something to do that gave him a way of ending his career, as running for president, being up on stage. We all know there's probably not going to be presidential debates, right? Because Trump's not going to do them. So this idea that he was going to get on stage, I mean, the Republican Party has already taken a position where they're almost certainly not going to participate in the debates in 2024. Not Trump, but Ron and Romney McDaniel. So this idea that he gets up on stage, he gets to make his case, that's not guaranteed, right? And so I think a lot of this, look, there's just a lot of noise in our system right now, right? There's a lot of confusion coming out of a tough couple of years. Our democracy almost went away a few years ago. It's been a bumpy time in the country, but we're getting to the other side of it. And my hope is that things are going to settle down, and all those Americans who've been giving money and volunteering are going to be able to go back and coach Little League and hang out with their families, and not, be worried about the country slipping away. And I think we're getting, Joe Biden ran to sort of say, I'm going to settle everything down again, right? And I think to a great degree he has. It's not been perfect, right? He's not done everything well, but he's trying to get America back to a place where we have civil debate, like you guys are exhibiting, and where we're Americans first and Republicans and Democrats second, and that we have this sense of common purpose again, that we need to be successful as a country. I think we're closer to that in some ways today than we've been in a long time, even if it doesn't feel it right now, right? Even if it feels like it's rancorous and difficult, but we'll see. Here's my forecast, because I don't predict the future. No one can predict. Anyone who tells you they can predict the future, you should not have on your show. Is that but I can forecast, and my forecast is that it's more likely that we get to 55 and Trump gets to 45 than any other scenario next year. And I think that would be the best scenario for the Republican Party. because then the dark grip of MAGA would start to be loosened, and the Romney Cheney wing, the Charlie Baker wing of the Republican Party, would be able to start to force a bigger debate to try to retake their party. That would be the best thing for the country, be the best thing for Republicans. And let's hope that's where we are, in November of next year, which is that it's a blowout election, a Reagan style blowout, right? Where the other party was repudiated, they didn't just lose. That blowout of the old Democratic Party is what created the modern Democratic Party, the new Democratic Party. Because those of us who fought that failed party were able to say, hey, look, we keep getting our ass kicked. We got to go try something different. I think that Republicans are going to need some kind of really big repudiation of MAGA to be able to start winning these internal fights again, where they reclaim their the party of Lincoln becomes the party of Lincoln and Reagan again, and not the party of MAGA and Trump. And that's what I hope. So that's why what I'm trying to do with my advocacy is to really challenge Democrats to think about not just winning the election, but getting to 55%. And remember, we got to 59 in Colorado, we got to 57 in Pennsylvania, we got to 55 in Michigan, 54 in New Hampshire, we got to 56 in Wisconsin just in May. We're not all that far away from it when the opponent is MAGA. And so this is not a pie in the sky thing. I mean, this is a doable thing for us, but we have to have the vision, the ambition. It's a man on the moon kind of thing, right? Like we have to build a politics that allows us to get to 55. And to me, the most powerful way to get there is by maximizing the turnout of young people. And it's why, if we can do that, and, I did it's on my Hopium site, but if you just change one thing in the 2020 election and you have young people vote at the same level of their population distribution, right, which is not a crazy thing, Biden wins by 10 points in 2024. You change one thing, everything else stays the same, right? You just change this one thing, which is young people vote, under 45-year-olds vote at the same level as their population distribution, not even above it. And Biden gains 6 points. That's where, if I'm a Republican, the thing that's keeping me up at night is what's going to happen with young people. Because if there is a massive youth vote, as there was in the battlegrounds in 2022, as there was in 2020, Trump's going to lose by an awful lot. And that may be the best thing for America and the Republican Party, but we'll see. We'll see.
I am one of those Republicans that is hoping that Trump is not our nominee.
Listen, as somebody who does this for a living, right? It is certainly possible that he's not. I mean, he is in one of the strongest reelection positions of any candidate in modern American history. He's already had tests. We've already learned he's a sexually assaulted a woman. He's been indicted for things. His numbers have gone up, right? I mean, DeSantis has lost half his support in the last few months. It's kind of, I mean, if you look at the data in the last few weeks, DeSantis is plummeting now. He's not just going down. It's like the pace of his fall. He's collapsing. We'll see what happens. And I just don't see the challenge for you, Pam, is that, can any Republican now bring the Never MAGA, the Liz Cheney wing and the MAGA wing together to build a coalition that can beat the Democrats? Can whoever win, whether it's, Glenn Youngkin, can he bring the MAGA, or DeSantis, can they bring all the MAGA people along with Liz Cheney? Can you thread the needle there politically? The Republicans were unable to do that in 2022, right? Candidates were too MAGA. They lost badly in the battlegrounds. And I think I don't know that MAGA can win a national election, or the Republican Party with so much MAGA baggage, even if it's Glenn Youngkin, let's just say somehow, because I think DeSantis is in the process of he's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
right?
he's over.
Yeah. I'm not going to say that, but he's in a lot of trouble, right? So let's say Glenn Youngkin gets in and somehow Trump stumbles and Youngkin somehow wins. If Trump doesn't endorse him? What happens, right? And so I just think that if you just sit here and spend 2 hours with all your close Republican buddies, a scenario where you win, it's not a likely scenario, where you can paint all these things that have to go right. It doesn't mean it can't happen, right? Crazy things happen, like in 2016, something crazy happened. It can happen in our politics, but likely scenario, Biden's reelected by a comfortable margin. Republicans get beat badly. The House flips. The Senate is up for the House will flip. If Biden wins, the House will flip back to Democrat. The Senate can go either way. right? I mean, the Senate is absolutely up for grabs, and we won't know, I think, the Senate until election day again, right? I think it's going to be, because we have to win in Ohio, West Virginia, Montana, hard states to win in a presidential year. And so the chance that the Senate could flip back to Republican, even if Biden won, right, is very possible. And so the Republicans may end up having one good thing happen on election day, right, which is they may end up winning the Senate while we take the presidency in the House. I think my view is today, the likely scenario is Biden's reelected comfortably, the House flips Democrat, the Senate is 50-50, could go either way, depends on candidate performance and what happens on the ground. And we'll see where we are in 6 months, but that's where I think we are today.
Well, Simon, you've been very generous with your time. It's been wonderful to have this conversation. I want folks to know you can continue to follow Simon Rosenberg, subscribe on Substack to Hopium Chronicles. You can follow him on Twitter at SimonWDC and on Threads at Simon_WDC. Thank you so much, Simon Rosenberg.
Thank you,
Thank
Simon.
you both, and thank you for keeping hope alive about civilized discourse in America. It needs to happen. We need more forums like this, and it's why it's an honor to be with both of you today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Wow.
He's great.
He's great. I mean, he does the most informed analysis of where the parties are that I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, really fascinating. I had read the Hopium Chronicles before he came on, just so I could be informed as to who he was. And so I'd read a lot, and it was great. I obviously disagree with him like 90% of the time. Right. But he's really fascinating. And that's why we have these conversations, Mara, right? It's like,
exactly,
we have these conversations so that people can become informed and that they can choose to listen. They could choose not to listen. But we just want to foster this inclusive environment where everyone's voice is heard, whether you agree or not.
Yes. And I appreciate having a Democrat in his position say what I've said many times, what I believe many times. We need a good, solid Republican Party. We need to have two good, reasonable parties who are pro-America, pro-democracy. And right now, Democrats don't feel like we have that from the current state of the Republicans.
Right. But as a Republican, I think we do. Right. So I just see it completely differently.
Yeah.
I obviously have a few concerns about some things that are going on in the party, because I don't think, I don't know about you, but I mean, as a Democrat, you just look at your party today and just be like, everything's 100% fantastic. I love it all. I mean, I don't think anyone says that. You're like, yeah, you know what? We're doing so many things great. I wish we would do this a little bit better, or on this one issue, I really am not there, but whatever. I mean, I don't know.
No, right. No, but right. It's like when Mike Capuano was on and he said, no candidate is going to be perfect. No party is going to be perfect. You go with the one you think is best. And as we've said before, just get to the polls, vote for the candidate you think best. And then the majority wins.
Right.
But I also, was interesting when he was talking about sort of different wings of the Republican Party. I was thinking you need a Going Disparate for just Republicans. So you have, one MAGA Republican and one non-MAGA. But I also wanted to mention that you've said a couple of times, you don't want Trump to be the nominee.
Yeah.
And the reason that you gave was the most compelling reason I've ever heard anyone give, because you said it's all about him. It's not about the issues that are impacting the people in this country. His campaign had become entirely about him.
Right. And I felt in 2016, because I loved him. I mean, I still love him. Don't get me wrong.
I know.
I mean, in 2016, I felt he was like this breath of fresh air, right? There's something different, something exciting, someone who wanted to blow up Washington in a sense, like, and that was great. And I loved it. Fantastic. I thought I did a great job. I obviously desperately wanted him reelected in 2020, was completely disappointed when he didn't get reelected. But now we're almost 8 years into this process, right, with him, and with all of the trouble that's surrounding him, with litigation that he has to fight, the constant fighting with the press. I do not like a candidate that really disparages another candidate. I mean, if you want to get up on the debate stage and say, listen, you know what, you were the governor of this state and you did this and that really stunk, and that was horrible. You want to talk about their policy, their positions, that's great. I'm just not into name calling. It should not be about the actual candidate themselves, right? And that's where I'm like, with Trump, it's like, I've said this before. Thank you so much. I love you. You've done a wonderful job. You can exit the building now, right? Like it's good. We're just gonna start fresh. And I know, and like I said, if he is the nominee, I will obviously vote for him. But I mean, I get to listen to so many different candidates here in New Hampshire, and so many people have just so many interesting ideas, and I just wish there's other voices that were being heard.
No, I think that's a great perspective. And, the fact that you are in New Hampshire and you do hear from so many candidates, because that's what happens in New Hampshire even now, you have a much broader perspective. I'm sure there are a lot, and there may be a lot of folks out there like you, Pam, who just haven't heard from the other candidates as much, which is why it's so important to hear their voices. And we welcome them to the show.
Yes, we do. And again, they're a little hard to get, but we're in the process of working with some of these campaigns to get them on, but they are a little like, it's a little hard, but we're working on it. Yeah,
we are. But this has been a great show. It's been wonderful to have Simon Rosenberg. Subscribe to Hopium Chronicles. Seriously, his analysis is better than anyone's.
Interesting. Very interesting guy. Yeah.
And it's been great to have you with us. You found us. We'd like you to help other people find us by going to whatever your podcast platform is, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or iHeartRadio, and subscribe to Going Disparate and give us a 5-star review. And you can follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta at Going Disparate, and email us. Let us know what you think. PamandMara@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. And remember, this is your place for stress-free politics, and where your political adversary may end up being your best friend someday.
It can happen to you. See you next
time. Bye.
Well, this conversation with Simon Rosenberg is so fascinating. We didn't want to cut him off. That's just part 1. Come back and you'll find part 2 with Simon Rosenberg. Welcome back to the Going Disparate podcast. We had such a good conversation with Democratic analyst Simon Rosenberg. We didn't want to cut him off. It made 2 shows, and you're about to hear part 2. Thanks for joining us.